Hey everyone, this is Ken, aka Table Topical, and today I'm going to be going over one of my paper decks, which I've lovingly called the Birds and Trees. This originally started back when Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief was spoiled, which if I scroll down here, Ivy, she's a green and a blue flying. Whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, they copy that spell. The copy targets Ivy. And when this came out, I knew that there was a few different effects that were sort of similar that had to do with targeting a specific creature with the spell and then getting some value out of it. And Ivy was obviously blue and green, but I noticed that there was creatures like Feather the Redeemed, which was green or red and white, as well as Blanca, um, and Orvar and Zada and a few others as well, like Mirrorwing Dragon. So I wanted to get all of these different effects into a single deck. And in order to do that, I needed to go with a four-color deck. So this is a Sans Black deck headed up by Ishai, Ojutai Dragonspeaker, and Tana the Bloodsower. I picked these two largely just because there weren't a lot of good options that I really liked. I didn't really want to go with Thrasios and Bruce or anything like that. I also really liked Tana's ability to create these saplings whenever she does damage to a player, because essentially what I'd be able to do using some of these other effects is to copy all of my targeted spells onto those tokens. And then Ishai is just generally good at going wide or going tall, whereas Tana goes wide. So it sort of gives you that tall and wide duo commanders. But realistically, the commanders for this are some of the different value engines down below. So we're just going to scroll down through the Moxfield page and talk about each different section. I wouldn't call this deck perfected. I think there's a lot of things we can improve on it, so feel free to leave some comments down below what you think we can do to add a little bit more spice to this. But let's just scroll down. So the first thing that you'll notice here is the card draw section. A lot of this is cantrips. So essentially, one mana spells that target a creature, draw a card, and then also get some value. So these are the core way that we're doing our targeting. Is we're targeting a creature, getting some value, and then drawing a card. And the reason why we want this, obviously, is because if you get the copies via some of these other creatures down below, you can draw multiple cards. So um, really valuable. So let's skip down to the value engines, and then we'll come back up to the top. So each of these has a different thing that it does for value. So let's focus on the creatures. So Blanca, when you cast a spell that targets him, he gets +2/+2 until end of turn and deals 2 damage to each opponent. So a little bit of value burn. Feather, whenever you cast a instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile it, put it back into your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So since we're going to be playing these 1 mana spells, we want to be able to recur them back to our hands to keep the value going. We've already talked about Ivy, where we can target something else and then get a copy on her. Let's see. Mirrorwing Dragon allows us to cast a spell that targets only Mirrorwing Dragon and then copy it for each other valid target. Sort of similar to Zada. So again, we can cast something on Zada and it'll copy it to everyone else. The other thing that we have here, well, is different ways to get other types of value. So for instance, whenever you cast a spell that only targets a single artifact or creature, create a token of it. And that's for both Vesuvan Duplimancy, and Orvar does something very similar as well. There's also ways that you can just get increased value off of these triggers with Veyran, which copies the trigger, or Sakashima, which can come in and copy just a legendary creature of your choice. Very similar to Ironicus' Wild Duplication. The other thing that's in here, I put this in here actually recently. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, flip a coin. You lose a flip, return that spell to its owner's hand. If you win the flip, copy it. So the interesting thing here is it's an on cast trigger, so you can still get the Zada trigger where it will copy onto all of your other creatures that it could target, or the Ivy trigger where it still get you still get the card draw or whatever you happen to get from Ivy, and even if it gets bounced back to your hand. So there's a lot of weird, cool synergy here between all these different cards. And I'm not sure exactly how it works yet. I haven't played it in practice, but this is sort of the core here. Is we have all these legendary creatures that we can play around with and get a lot of extra value. So going back up to the top again, a lot of this is sort of these cantrippy cards get a little bit of extra value. Ancestral Anger is pretty cool because you can target a creature, it gets trample and plus X plus 0 until end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of cards named Ancestral Anger in your graveyard. So, a little something very similar to some of these other things, but it does give them trample. So this could probably also go in the overrun section. Archmage Emeritus, just a quick Magecraft trigger for drawing cards. Beta Virtuoso, very similar. Season of Growth, again, you target things, you draw cards, which is good. Skull Clamp, you can take some of these 1/1s that you're making either with Tana or some of these other effects and sacrifice them to draw some cards, which is always good. And Whirlwind of Thought, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, draw a card. So I don't think this deck will have any problem sort of drawing through the deck pretty quickly between all of these different card draw effects. Interaction, I didn't really spend a whole heck of a lot of time thinking about interaction here. I slotted in 8 interaction spots, but you could really pick any non-black interaction you want here. This is just what I happen to have free, but I think there's a lot of things you could do here, either counter spells or some of the more efficient cheap removal. So this is probably one of the places where I didn't put a lot of thought quite yet, but it'll be one of the places where we continue to improve it over time, since this is one of my paper decks. Moving on to lands, similar to the interaction, this is just what I happen to have. One of the interesting or notable things here is I think there's a lot of value in filter lands. I don't have all of them, but I think you'd want to play a lot of where are they? A lot of these this cycle of land, or no, not that cycle of lands. This cycle of lands, the Sungrass Prairie type lands, where you pay 1 and tap it to get 2 certain colors. And the reason for that is we do have down here in our ramp section Bergi, who makes red mana. We have Kaikar, who essentially is a red mana value engine there. Jessica's Will, which obviously gives you red mana as well. So I think there's a lot of ways to make single colors of mana in the ramp section down here. And one of the things you might run into is you have a lot of red or green mana, and you want to make sure that you can cast some of these other colored cantrip type effects. So I think the filter lands would be really, really valuable in here, and I don't have them in here yet, but I think they would be good. I think they also, when you get down to the ramp section, the signets also might be valuable for that filtering as well. Go back up here. So obviously when you go wide and when you sort of play some of these effects to buff your creatures, you're going to want to end the game. So there's an overrun section here, ways to give trample or flying. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you want to sort of have a bunch of creatures wide on your battlefield, cast, a bull strength or whatever happens to be on a Zada or a Mirrorwing Dragon, and then get that effect across all of your tokens. Or you could just go Crater Hoof or some of these other effects that give trample. Cool card from this DMU. Balmore Battle Mage Captain. Flying, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1. +0 and gain trample into end of turn. So a lot of cool value there for getting that overrun on your token. With the ramp, I think I already mentioned the signets for filtering. The other thing that might be really good here is adding in more mana dorks in place of maybe some of these. I don't know exactly where I'd fit it. Maybe in place of the Nature's Lore 3 visits. Because just having them there and then giving them buffs and having more creatures to copy effects on is never a bad thing. And I don't know that we get too much out of fetching lands, so I'd take those out. And then I think there's a lot of value in Burgi, obviously, because you cast spells, you get red mana. Same deal with Stormkiln, except for you get the treasure token. And then Jessica's Will gets you the mana, and then also lets you dig a little bit deeper. Maybe get a couple more of those cantrip effects and dig a little bit deeper in your deck to keep going on a turn. I think there would be an opportunity here as well to get ritual spells. So some of those red ritual spells to keep getting some of these Magecraft triggers, as well as just give you a little bit of extra mana to continue on a turn where you go off. And then finally, the last section that I have here is token generators. I didn't want to rely just on Tana for the token generation, so I also brought in Adeline, a Crone Crusader, Rosnacht, who all can create some token value there. Monastery Mentor, very, very powerful. Same with Kaikar. Obviously, you get those tokens from Monastery Mentor whenever you cast it on a creature spell. Same thing with Kaikar. The difference is Kaikar lets you sacrifice the spirits you get to add red. So again, similar to the Burgi and to the Stormkill, and it sort of lets you keep going off a little bit. But that is red mana, so I think the filtering is more and more important there. So this is the deck as it stands. It's currently at about 288. This is TCG low, I believe. Not the exact versions of the cards I have, but like I said, I haven't really played it yet. It's just something that I brewed up and now have fully in paper. If you go to the primer here, this is some of the stuff that I talked about before with the things to consider. So, lands, might want to consider the filter lands. Same thing with the filter signets in the ramp section, adding more mana dorks, and then maybe adding some rituals or some of the spirit guides to really continue the lines when you keep casting those cantrips. And then this is something that is going to take a lot of play testing to really balance out, because you do have a lot of different things that you're trying to do in this deck. So, you're trying to get those cantrips out, but you also want to have one of the value engines out. You also want to have some tokens to make sure that your value engines get some value. And then each of the value engines wants a different thing. So I think there's a lot of different ways that this is pulling itself, and I think that's going to prevent it from being super duper high powered. But it does keep it in a nice little maybe casual area. So I think it's a pretty cool little deck, and it was a cool deck to brew and really think about. So I'm gonna test it out, and maybe we can talk about updates when I get a little bit more time into it, or when some new cards come out in upcoming sets. So yeah, let me know what you think. What should I do, with the interaction with the lands, or really any section? What do you think about the balance between all the different ways that we're going with this? Because I think it's not something where it's just one type of thing that we're really, really focusing on. It's spreading it out over lots of different value engines, and I think that's a cool way to scratch a certain part of my brain that I really, really like. But I have a feeling that it's not going to synergize exactly the way I think it is. So, yeah, is that what you think? Leave a thing in the comments. Let me know what you think. But yeah, that's it. Have a good day.